It's April 2023 as I make this video, and I thought I'd just present what seems to be the synergy of the channel so far for me. I began the channel as an effort to make sense of the suppression, blockade, denial dynamic of dealing with failure, dealing with shame, etc., and not having a space to explore that within either the Jach and Lazaris forum or concept synergy, or Jach chose not to listen to or respond to my correspondence to him. And, so that was one thing. And then it escalated again with what seems like the schizophrenia of one of the most domineering and control-oriented documents being kind of thrust out to the community. Literally, meditations, sign-ins not being able to be completed until everyone in the digital landscape of concept synergy agreed to sign what is essentially a domination document out of fear, out of paranoia, etc. You just read through the clauses, and they have absolutely nothing to do with the Lazaris material and everything to do with fear and paranoia. And that again needs to be highlighted and presenced, because it speaks to some tremendous paradoxes, one of which is the heightened degree of paranoia and control within concept synergy, within the staff dynamics, within the dynamics of staff and Lazaris and Penny, and the whatever it is, of Lazaris witnessing that and being present to that, and not speaking to that pattern, which is incredibly crazy-making. And so, I think it's very difficult to get a hold of anything until it is put into words. And so the channel escalated in terms of responding by trying to name and put these different patterns into context. And that's not too difficult to do. I think it took about 10 hours for me to become comfortable kind of looking at, how does this or that language in the user agreement that is demanded, meaning that concept synergy doesn't ask to sign this agreement voluntarily. It's literally your relationship with Lazaris through concept synergy is cut off if you do not sign this immediately. And, that doesn't get any more laughable than it is. And so, and that also strikes me as abuse. It seems wrong, I think, more from the child point of view. And I think it's very important to understand that there are a tremendous amount of people, at least 25% of the demographic within the Lazaris community, are coming to Lazaris in a relationship of child in relationship to parent. Now, I've been part of that demographic, and sometimes still am, right? So as we go through different evolutions and cycles of our maturation, there are different traumatic events that regress us down to the age of the original undigested, unintegrated trauma at a certain age, right? And then through the age of that 5-year-old, that 7-year-old, looking out at the world as a scary place, but also looking for a safe parent, right? Every 5-year-old needs a safe parent to survive, right? And survival is the first of our needs. It's the first level of love, and self-love is to survive. And so every individual and every part of ourselves that is, not older than 10 is desperately looking for safe patterns of energy projecting a parental role. Please help me, please guide me, please teach me so that I can survive. And so in a highly traumatic culture that is also traumatically illiterate, interestingly, Lazaris has done almost nothing in the terrain of PTSD and trauma, which is the fundamental thing, as far as I can understand. The intergenerational trauma, the intergenerational PTSD is what locks the cult and the family system into the state of repeating unconscious patterns, because trauma requires help to deal with in a cult, in a culture, in a family system where that help is less than 1% available, right? And so that guarantees 99% repetition with some evolution, with some tweaking, etc., with some, confusion and all of that. But that dynamic, that system is running, and it's running in the biology. It's feeding blood to the reptilian brain, and that supersedes, right, all of the spiritual literature and cassettes and meditations and all of that. There isn't a single person in the throes of PTSD, right, that says, oh, let me, do a Lazaris technique and that shifts it, right? There can be some lifting, right? But that does not transcend PTSD statistically, right? It's a very, very, it's a state of grace if and when that does happen, but it's less than 1% of the time. And so that pattern is very present. It's present, it's driving concept synergy and everyone in it, right? Fear, control, the reptilian brain, right? It's the oldest brain. It's all about domination, control, out of scarcity, out of fear, of pain, right? Of things that could go wrong, right? And Lazaris has not penetrated that brain within concept synergy. I would say that Jach and concept synergy are at least as unconscious as everyone else, if not more so, right? There's this tremendous sleep around this whole schizophrenic dynamic of what's happening in the protocols between the staff and originally staff and Penny, and now the staff and Jach, or other people, and then the staff and themselves. And you can certainly get windows into that in some of my earlier videos and the interview with Barbara and Terry, and references to other people that have just not had a good experience being left in the wake. I don't know anyone professionally that's either done business with concept synergy or, whether it's Gilbert Williams, whether it's Lawrence Stoller, whether it's any of the staff. I don't know anyone who's done business with concept synergy, with Jach and Penny, that has come away feeling that that was an uplifting or kind of excellent experience. Everyone's dealt with it in different to different degrees, but it's usually with awareness, and Jach and Penny have lots of their own stuff like everyone else, right? But that suggests that 40 years of Lazaris isn't enough to penetrate to transform, to transcend those structures within anyone at concept synergy. People transcend by leaving concept synergy and, creating a better reality for themselves, not usually by going there, right? And I don't know exactly this moment in time, but let's just take the first 30 years as a pretty big slice of time. That wasn't enough. 30 years of Lazaris wasn't enough for those patterns to transcend with monthly interactions one-on-one with Lazaris, etc. And so that speaks to a pretty high degree of failure, a pretty high degree of incompetency, and a certain amount of insanity, because you have to keep doing the same thing over and over again while seeing month after month it isn't working. It didn't work for this staff member. It didn't work for that staff member. It's not working today, but let's do another workshop, right? And so right in there is a whole wonderful puzzle of stuff to unpack and make sense of, because that's the data set, right? And so what to do with that, right? And so my child is terrified of this type of stuff because, the safe parent isn't delivering salvation, right? My adolescent is disgusted, angry, confused. This is nuts, and let's blame and just at least start talking. And I think that's a healthy impulse. I discovered Lazaris at age 13, and so there's definitely a strong relationship with Lazaris from my adolescent, right? And so when I was 13, I didn't know the shadow side of concept synergy, of the community, of Lazaris friends, etc. And so, it just seemed like this, the way Lazaris was presenting it sounded, much better than my life. So I wanted something that, but I could have just looked at my own life at 13 and said, I feel suicidal. That's not a great success from years of working with Lazaris, right? You work with Lazaris and then you feel suicidal. I mean, that's not a great success. I was busily programming and doing meditations and, every week and different tapes, etc. And my parents were having a messy divorce and traumatizing all of my younger siblings and doing their best to shame me as well. That wasn't a great outcome. And so I could have just looked at my own life as a microcosm, as a fractal representation of the probability field and said, well, it's probably not, much better in Jach's world or anyone else. But I didn't. I thought that there must be this wonderful place because Lazaris was saying it's easier to succeed than it was to fail, and the new age is coming and all of that. And so I thought, I'm not doing it wrong. There must be a better way. So my adolescent is definitely, feeling freer of that constriction and that judgment towards self and that shame to say, no, there's nothing wrong with you, adolescent, that, you're having all this pain and misery while creating your own reality, because that's a big part of the probability field. In the culture at large, Penny did not have this magical death, where she laid down and knew it was her time to be and prepared and da-da-da-da-da. Neither did Michael, right? And it wasn't serene and wonderful. No, they're doing it as klutzy and messily as the average person, as far as I can tell. And that's, so there's this kind of, this shouldn't be spoken. But I think the adolescent's job is to speak these things. Lazaris, is quick to say that it's very adolescent to do these things in public, right? So this would be a very adolescent thing to do, make videos like this. We wouldn't want to be adolescent, right? We want to be more spiritual. I don't find it useful to lay that on there, meaning my relationship with Lazaris, with Concept Synergy, with myself, with the community has improved by about 500% since making the first video. It hadn't improved at all being silent for over a decade. Meaning for over a decade since I stopped actively working with Lazaris, I just thought this is kind of crazy and it's not politically correct to talk about this craziness around any Lazaris friend because there's all this defensive energy and that's amplified tenfold within the Jach and Lazaris room. And so none of this energy moved in any transformational way for 10 years in silent bemusement and doubt and self-doubt, etc. It moved within about, I guess it's 2 or 3 years now. Yeah, let's say 3 years. So within 3 years of starting this channel, I'd say I feel actually like 7 times better about the whole thing at this moment in time than I did when I began. And that's been gradual and steady. So whether you call it adolescent, whether you call it spiritual, whether you call it talking truth to power, none of that really matters. All that matters in terms of me deciding, is it the right choice for me to put these things into word publicly, is I feel less alone. I feel less angry. I feel less resentful. I feel less judgmental. This is just funny, right? This is human stuff, human bullshit, human dynamic, right? I've yet to meet the person who isn't schizophrenic, who isn't mildly insane, who doesn't have a strong sociopathic undertone in some way, who isn't trying to control while talking about, lofty purposes. That just seems to be what people do at this point in human evolution, and they do it because it works. Meaning putting out a performance and then doing the shadowy stuff underhanded works better in our cult than doing the control dynamic up front. Lazaris pointed this out, like it doesn't seem to work to go up to someone and say, Hera, I'd like to control you in this way and bully you in this way and do this and that. How about it? People don't sign up. And so people sign up, I'd like to be your friend, I'd like to do this. So Concept Synergy doesn't say we'd like to hire you and control you and make you feel paranoid and underpay you and shame you for doing things that aren't, your area of expertise and then fire you and then blame you and lay spiritual crap on you and then have Lazaris stand by and make you feel like shit. The Concept Energy doesn't say, how about it? No. Would you like to help with Lazaris's mission? Would you like to do this? And so, that works, right? Plenty of people sign up and Lazaris, Concept Synergy can always hire staff. But the statistical track record, if you look at every employee and everyone who's ever done business with Concept Synergy and how good they feel about the dynamic, you find more than 75% failure. They're not feeling great about this. Right? So if you sign into a probability field where you have a 75% statistical chance, unless you do something much better than the other 75% to avoid that abuse dynamic, well, that's not a great thing to sign up for, right? But it works, right? Jach has gotten richer in that dynamic, right? And it works that Lazaris isn't talking about it directly, all right? I am. Lazaris is not. And that hurts the people, meaning that's one of the, particularly the regressed child in each person. Why didn't Lazaris stand up for me? Why hasn't Lazaris fulfilled the parental promise? Now, Lazaris can say they're not the parent, but you can also tell your lover 1,000 times, I have, that I'm not your parent. That does not help a regressed, traumatized child. Has it ever worked in your relationship to point out that you're not the parent when they're in a regress state and they're desperately seeking a parent? Of course not, right? That's not how trauma works. What works is healing, understanding, going back into that past, helping that person grow up, transcend the trauma, and then they don't need a parent. The older parts don't need a parent, and they stop looking at you as a parent, right? So that's what works. That's not what Lazaris does, right? So there are thousands and thousands of people that at any given moment in point in time are looking at Lazaris as parent or looking at Jach as parent. They don't behave well as a parent. It creates betrayal, etc. But a child doesn't know what to do about that, right? Because a child can only project parent. And the Lazaris material is not very effective at transcending trauma, at healing and transforming PTSD, which is a chronic virus in most of the culture, right? And so there's tons of dysfunction, right? But Lazaris is not discussing that. So it's a little crazy making and scary and, disorganizing, etc. But, that's Lazaris. Lazaris is not perfect, right? And so, this movement through this territory, number one, the child in me had to discover that I was not going to die, right? My child thought I was going to die as I moved into my adolescent around this dynamic, right? But I haven't died, right? So there's some confidence in that. My child also is frightened of being pinned as the ultimate negative ego and all that, and for speaking out and all of that. That also hasn't happened. Instead, I've had empathy from different people. Other people that are stuck in their relationship with Lazaris have had some sense of catharsis and liberation. Other people have, you have to, in the larger free market world, rather than the control pattern within the Jach and Lazaris forum, stupidity and control stands out in public comments, etc. And so, it's whether it's my stupidity and my control or yours, when it's in a public space, we can all recognize hypocrisy and patterns of shaming and control and all of that. So it's generally, I think it's very important to dethrone one's gods, right? The child puts different things on pedestals, and my child put Lazaris and concept synergy and Jach and various people on pedestals, and the adolescent has kind of knocked them off the pedestals, right? Which then creates a space for the adult to say, yeah, I don't have any confidence that I would have done a better job overall of being either a Lazaris and concept synergy employee, or of being Penny, or of being Jach, right? In other words, with what does and doesn't work within the Lazaris material, meaning there's tons of stuff that doesn't work, meaning plenty of areas in my life have gotten chronically and consistently worse while prioritizing Lazaris's primary relationship. And some things have gotten better, but not, forever, right? So there's things have gotten worse. I would consider Lazaris bad medicine for those, right? I think Lazaris has done relatively little to understand and work with PTSD. Lazaris has also done relatively little to promulgate the awareness of other better technologies out there. So, and then concept synergy has shut down dialogue and sharing around what really works around different techniques, right? And what doesn't, just as importantly. Lazaris is shit when it comes to trying to handle this with these techniques. Absolute shit, statistically. But Lazaris is incredible with trying to work with this, with these techniques. And Lazaris works for some people and not others. And these, so that's the reality of just about anything. Anything of substance, anything of quality. And I think Lazaris has a lot of substance and a lot of quality. And so the best that's out there works some of the time for some people in certain areas and doesn't work some of the time for a lot of people and doesn't work in all areas, right? And so one of the more important facilities in any program, in any business, in anything is you've got to be able to refer to someone better, right? So I try and, as a business owner, I ask a series of questions at the beginning of a relationship with a client. And it's my job to say, I'm not the best person for this, right? If you're a window cleaner, you don't accept jobs to clean gutters. And you don't promise that cleaning gutters is going to help the windows. But in metaphysical, in spiritual circles, that happens constantly. I'm a healer. Come to me, I'll heal you. No, you're a very specialized person who works on very certain things in a very particular way. And in this moment of time, that will fuck the person up, relatively speaking, or it will help this problem, but not the problem they're coming to you with. Or it will help the problem they're coming to you, but only 30% because you don't have a clear model, right? You only know how to work with 30% of it. That's the bit you've worked with in your own life, so you know how to help someone else there. And unfortunately, in a spiritually illiterate, in a psychologically illiterate, in a traumatically illiterate, in a relationally illiterate culture, where 80% of all of these topics and awarenesses is not only unconscious, not only incompetently dealt with, dishonored constantly, it's shamed and misdirected, right? So it's worse than just ignorance. It's actually consciously shaming, punishing, and misdirecting all kinds of positive natural flows. Whether it's the sexual energy flow, or whether it's the voice of expression or the voice of maturation, these flows are cut down right and left by fears, judgments, hate, panic, spiritual critics within concept synergy and within the Lazaris community, right? Authentic, healthy cycles and flows of energy are cut right and left consistently within every fabric of the Lazaris community, whether it's Jach, whether it's Penny, whether it's concept synergy, whether it's the community. And that's a problem if you want to reintegrate and develop awareness of these healthy flows of energy. Now, they are not cut directly by Lazaris, but Lazaris does not highlight where and how they're being cut within concept synergy, and the two are often conflated. And so that's one of the freedoms that I have, having talked about all of this stuff for more than 20 hours on video, is the chance to unconflate concept synergy and Lazaris, right? Lazaris is an incompetent friend in some ways that has a great tolerance for, all kinds of issues within concept synergy and has a great tolerance for not talking about it, right? I do not have that tolerance, right? I came so close to going insane, which was the prayer of my parents, please, please, please go insane so that you don't notice these things and don't shame us for this, and there. I came so close to being insane that I have a very low tolerance for other people's unspoken insanity, right? So if someone will tell me I'm crazy, I say I want this, but then I do this, that's easy for me to deal with. I can say, you're just pretty normal, right? But thank you for telling me. I can deal with you. But when someone is schizophrenically insane and claims to be highly integrated, that is terrifying, right? That takes me close to, it's like, I know you want me to go crazy to believe your delusions about yourself. So it's very natural for me to have a strong antithesis to that pattern. It's like, no fucking way am I going to pay you money to go insane, you son of a bitch, right? Fuck you, right? And that's good adolescent energy for rebelling against the childhood, like, you know, it's so sad, you know, the desperation with which so many grown-ups beg their children to go literally fucking insane so that they don't have to deal with their shit, right? Because if the child is willing to be slapped and traumatized and raped and humiliated, right? Every child is, and is willing to say, thank you for your love, you really love me, and this is so spiritual, and there's nothing you're doing wrong, which every child is, right? Every child goes along with this program because they have no better alternative, right? And it's fortunate if the adolescent can come along and say, bullshit, absolute fucking bullshit, because that can break the spell, right? It's not the end of the cycle because you realize, well, you've just got different bullshits on the menu, right? Go over to this spiritual group, they've got this bullshit on the menu. Go over to Concept Synergy, they've got this bullshit on the menu. Over here, they've got this bullshit. And so there's always some good nutritional value. There's a lot of rotting, decaying food. And you've got the same problem with you, right? It's not like I can say, let's just get rid of all these idiotic, hypocrites and rely on myself, because what do I have on the menu? I have my family system on the menu, right? And I've transcended some, I've avoided others, I've repressed some, I've run away from other bits of it, but that's what I have, right? I have a lot of default stuff that I haven't yet found the resources to transcend this or that bit of code, right? Because family systems are put into the biology of the body with a loud alarm that says if you break this law, whatever it is, if you deviate from the system, you will die. The system will disown you. As any infant knows, you're dead in a matter of days if you don't have mother's milk, if you don't. So the system will disown you. You will die. Your country will go to war with you if you deviate from certain systems, if you start exposing the national shadow. Just look at WikiLeaks, right? Look at Edward Snowden, right? What did they do wrong? They were the best journalists in the world as far as the US power structure is concerned, right? Julian Assange, Edward Snowden, were better journalists at uncovering the shadow of United States foreign policy and defense policy than any other journalist in the world. And what did we do? We took Snowden's passport away when he was in Russia, so he's now stuck in the worst enemy because we contrived that. We took away his US passport so he couldn't leave Russia and go to sanctuary in South America, right? Wonderful, right? We say we're worried about protecting state secrets. Let's make sure the only safe place in the world he's in is in Russia. This is absolute nuts, right? And what about Julian Assange, right? Active, effective, unedited, no spin, just these are the documents. This is your shadow. What do? We cut him out, right? So it's no accident, and it's not surprising that concept synergy as a fractal microcosm of this domination and control, which works, right? There are countries across the world that are terrified of speaking the truth of what the United States is doing behind closed doors. It's working, right? If you dig a little deep into the Lazaris community, you will find the same terror exactly about speaking about the dysfunction within concept synergy. You don't want to be, for example, I'm cut out from the Lazaris forum and the Lazaris stream because this is a nuts user agreement, right? I'm not willing to go that insane to say that the people who have worked with Lazaris for 40 fucking years, the best they've come up with is the best domination user agreement on the internet. You cannot speak the name of Lazaris without written consent to concept synergy. Bravo, Jach. Right? 40 years of domination and control. Bravo, right? Why? Because it works, right? Lazaris is candid about that. Why do people control? Because it works, right? How does Lazaris know it works? He's watching Jach doing it, right? And people are signing these abuse contracts right and left with concept synergy because they don't want to lose their relationship with Lazaris. They're not speaking up. They're not grown up. Or they have a good sense of humor about it. Okay, concept synergy wants to play God, dominate and control and pretend how spiritual they are. Well, that's concept synergy. Has nothing to do with me. It's a little bit too close to the insanity that I was raised in. And so I'm choosing to be an outlaw in that sense. I'm outside of the little box of concept synergy's control. But I haven't died. And I've got more of my freedom in that dynamic, right? It's, and it's and the tapes work better. Luckily, I have tapes that were sitting around I almost got rid of all of them. I sold a bunch of them some years ago, but I still have around 100 tapes or whatever. And that's plenty to work with the more positive side of Lazaris. So what I have, and Lazaris does not judge, does not condemn, does not disown me in any of these cycles. And that's also, I think, one of the more important things. Lazaris spelling out things that played a big part of my spiritual critic in my teenage years. I don't want to be that. I don't want to be that. The spiritual critic is something we have to confront in the process of both owning our shadow, but also owning our power and becoming more. Right? And so this whole project is outside of the boundary of my spiritual critic. And so in a certain way, that's passing that defense, right, of the spiritual critic saying, don't go past here, that's this, these are the labels, that's self-pity, that's adolescent, that's martyr, that's negative ego. Don't go past here. But in order to have free speech, in order to have freedom to explore, you have to look, and you have to integrate, and you have to honor. Self-pity is here for a reason. Martyrhood is also here for a reason. Control is here for a reason. Domination is here for a reason, right? If none of those had any function or use within humanity's evolution, they'd be long gone. They're not long gone. They're all over the place because they get all kinds of rewards within the current structure, including concept synergy, right? You get more rewards in certain ways. Right? I actually have more freedom to speak than most people within the Lazaris community. I knew within the community what I couldn't bring up without upsetting the people around me. And so I didn't get to talk about that. Right? But now I'm talking about that. And so I get a clear head. And when all that stuff is clear, what remains? What remains past all of the bullshit, all of the hypocrisy, all the insanity, all the lies, all the stupidity, all the control, all the failure? What remains? Presence remains, right? Self-love remains. Lazaris's love and presence remains. And I feel I have more access to that because all this cloud, is through expressing it out, it's not clouding my windshield. I'm not holding it close anymore. It's gone. It's like I can remember how upset I was, but I don't need that anymore. I've gone through a lot of that. And so I guess, at this point, I have a greater trust that expressing the unexpressible, the unforgivable, the taboo is generally going in a good direction, right? You have to look. Obviously, if you're Anne Frank and you're in the Nazi Germany paradigm and, you say, oh, I'm a Jew, and you're burnt alive, that's not very effective, right? And Concept Synergy has banished me from the website, right? I can't get in without signing an abuse contract I don't feel like signing, right? But they don't have a control lock on Lazaris's love, and they can't control all the tapes they released before the agreement was signed, and they're still floating around at a great bargain, right? I sold most of my tapes for $5 a tape, right? And that's probably not an anomaly, meaning if you go out and find a bunch of tapes and you want to just bypass Concept Synergy going forward, whether they're not going to sell for more than they sold before, right? Because tapes are old-fashioned. But the tapes are also more reliable and less Wi-Fi interferent, etc., than any of the current systems, because they're focusing on streaming rather than a download, which is not Audible's. Audible is the leader in this, in best practices and value. Audible is 10 times better than Concept Synergy as a digital publisher in every aspect of interface, value, service, downloadable, functionality. Audible, 10 times better than Concept Synergy. Concept Synergy publishes the tape on excellence. Audible, 10 times better than Concept Synergy. And so, but tapes are actually better in some ways than, the interrupted internet connection and all that, and the whole weird control dynamic with Concept Synergy. So I find myself in a place of peace. I don't really have much to say. Other people are going to go and do their things. I'm sure Concept Synergy will continue to control and to some extent manipulate their client base as long as they're frightened of various things. And their clients will go along with that as long as they're frightened of losing Lazaris, because that's how codependent relationships work, right? I don't want to lose Lazaris if I speak up about this horrible dynamic, and well, you're gone, right? And that is how codependence is held in place, right? If you do this, I'm leaving you and I'm never coming back. I guess I'll stop speaking up about your hypocrisy and the fact that you didn't do this and this, right? Don't push it, right? Well, our world is filled with dysfunctional relationships, most of them codependent. So what's one more, right? What's one more? It's not the end of the world, as long as so I don't, although it doesn't seem healthy for me at this point to, have a relationship. I don't like sending money to Concept Synergy as long as they're bullying their clients in this way. I don't like that. But, it's generally, I look at the larger cultural pattern because it's very similar to the divorce statistic. We are producing more and more dissociation, more and more judgment, and more loneliness. Loneliness is an epidemic. Dissociation is an epidemic. Divorce is an epidemic, right? There are more and more fragmented people with less and less close friends. And the reality is that 95% of all relationships in our cult, whether it's the cult of Lazaris, the cult of America, the cult of the West, in our cult, the root word of culture, 95% of the relationships have elements of abuse, elements of self-hate, elements of schizophrenia, weird patterns, right? All kinds of please hurt me. You hurt me here and I'll hurt you there, right? So they're filled with insanity, stupidity, cruelty, abuse, etc. And people die younger as a general rule, statistically, who are isolated. Meaning loneliness is a deeper curse in longevity than being in dysfunctional relationships. And every relationship on the endless continuum of excellence is, to some degree, dysfunctional, and will be viewed like 1,000 years from now, if we've done anything to evolve. We will look at all the relationships today, the relationship with Lazaris, the relationship with our spouse, the relationship with ourselves. We will look at our relationships 1,000 years in the past as mind-numbingly absurd, painful, stupid, backwards, ridiculous. Just like we look back 1,000 years from now. But that will always be the case. That will always be the case. And so I'm happy that I have a more free, somewhat relationship with Lazaris than am either in the child dynamic of attachment or the adolescent dynamic of dissociation, right? So my relationship with Lazaris has gone from both, buy all the tapes, listen to all the tapes in my 11, 12, 13, 14, 15-year-old, get all the tapes, and hopefully my life's going to work out. Moving into the more adolescent, this is not working, this is bullshit, and then ultimately I can't make any sense of this. No more Lazaris, let's do this other stuff that works a lot better. To then coming back kind of into it in dealing with the betrayal and the shadow dynamic. And now, Lazaris is fabulous for different parts of my life, right? But it doesn't have the overtone of fear it had before I made this, series of videos. So based on that pattern for me, right? If you have unresolved stuff with concept synergy, unresolved stuff with Lazaris, that is not being resolved in another way, the best thing that I know to date is make a YouTube channel, share it all as unbiasedly as you can, knowing you're going to be covered with all kinds of residue, and no one is unbiased. We're all biased. That's what makes us individuals. But share it as truthfully, right? It wouldn't be truthful to say that I'm not enjoying the evening meditation. I enjoy the evening meditation every time I do it. Every time I do it, I enjoy it. And in that enjoyment, it enriches the quality of life. So if I suppressed that data to say how much I don't enjoy a lot of side one of a lot of the things. I start listening to some of these tapes and Lazaris just goes on and on and on for 45 fucking minutes, right? Of this and that and the other. It's like, just get on with it, right? I don't even listen to side one in a lot of these. It just doesn't do anything for me. Side two of tape one often doesn't do anything. So, but the meditations usually do. The meditations on just about any tape will be constructive, right, for me at this time. So if I have an impulse, as I did this evening, to pick up a tape, put it in, I do it, right? So that's working. So this is what isn't working, this is what's working, right? But the key is to break free of the taboo and the spiritual critic, to be able to find an authentic data-based relationship. Meaning I I have to blow this stuff out of the water so that I'm not making any of these choices based primarily on fear. Fear of not listening to a Lazaris tape. What does that mean about my ego? That's been a place I've been in. Or fear of, if I listen to this, it's going to skew me off my path. I've been in that place too, right? Lazaris is clearly fucked up in this way or that way, so if I listen to this, it's going to throw me off my path, To be able to just notice, like, okay, I have this impulse, I have this intuition, I have this sense it makes sense. I try this, but it didn't work out. And it didn't work out, and it didn't work out. Okay, that seems to be a pattern of not working. But this one seems to be a pattern of working. Let's do that, right? Sometimes it works for me to do yoga while Lazaris is doing a meditation, right? I feel better than if I was sitting doing what Lazaris was saying. And I feel better than if I was doing yoga and not listening to Lazaris, right? That's data. Meaning I'm listening to meditation, I'm starting to get drowsy, I want to stay awake, I want to do yoga. Oh, this works better doing Lazaris meditations, eyes open with yoga, right? So this is and I think it's important in terms of growing to get to that point of freedom. I want to do half a meditation. I want to go jogging while I'm meditating. I want to fall asleep to a meditation. I don't want to do this, I want to do this. I want to make a video, right? That's also worked. I listened to something with Lazaris. Fuck that. That's complete nuts. Complete nuts. Let's make a video about that. That works, right? Meaning I feel clearer. My remaining relationship with Lazaris doesn't have that doesn't feel good, and I'm not talking about it residue. Why aren't I talking about it? Is that because I doubt myself? What is that, right? So, talking about that works. So that's where I find myself today. And based on that, I would say that communicating in a more public space, not trying to direct it at any given person. There's tons of Lazaris people that can't and aren't ready and don't want to hear any of this. They don't know what to do with it. It ruins their childlike thing. Any child whose parent is criticized in the slightest way will attack you. Why? Because they're depending on the idealization of that company, that person, that deity, that channel. They're depending on the perfection of that idea. That's how they're going to get through life. Right? They're going to devote themselves to Lazaris as their parent, despite what Lazaris says. That's not how psychology works. As long as they're in a regressed state, which many people are at least some of the time, they're going to relate to Lazaris as a parent. And what terrifying news is it, right? When I remember when I was explaining to my younger siblings the dysfunctions and the abuse cycles of my parents. Those of my siblings that were still in a childlike relationship with my parents fought me tooth and nail. They betrayed themselves to protect their abuser. That's how psychology works, right? Right? So as long as concept synergy is in a parental role to a traumatized individual, they will willingly take a beating and heap shame on themselves to protect concept synergy. That's how psychology works. All children do this to their abusers. And everyone can be regressed to a childlike state because we've all experienced abuse and we're in a traumatically illiterate culture. So when we get into that regressed state, most of us don't know how to seek the help to go beyond it. And Lazaris is fucking useless, right? In this territory. Constellation therapy, psychedelic therapy, good psychedelic therapy, good constellation therapy, right? Inner dialogue, there's all kinds of things. EMDR works better than Lazaris techniques, including knowing what's going on and understanding the biology, right? So, you got to get Lazaris's bullshit out of the space enough to do those things that work so that you can then come back to Lazaris and do what works there as more of an adult, right? Because it doesn't work to say we're not your parents, right? Doesn't work, right? So there's a large demographic of, Lazaris people that will freak out about this. And obviously, if those are friends of yours, you can't talk to them about that. But sharing it, at least putting it into words so that you understand it. And that's the benefit of making this public. Meaning, when I make a video, I'm imagining that I'm the audience and I'm speaking to that person. And by the time I successfully convey something to that imaginary person, a part of me gets it and understands it in a way that I didn't before. It's the power, I think Lazaris calls it magic in the telling, right? This is magic in the telling at work, right? So in 3 years, my relationship with Lazaris through making this channel has first of all acknowledged the traumatic, the wounded child, acknowledged and empathized with a lot of the pain, gone through the adolescent stage of fuck this, right? And honoring the adolescent and their state. And now has iterated into a place where I can have some relationship with Lazaris some of the time that works 70% of the time. So I would say that my relationship with Lazaris is 70% positive at this point. There's still times I put in a tape and I say, what the fuck is this? And I turn it off again because it doesn't work as well as something else. Right? But that's good, right? It's gone from being mildly negative overall and not fully feeling integrated and expressed to 70% positive. And there's a certain maturing that has to occur, right? So this works. And so thank you, Dane, for going through this journey, having an experiment, it working. And thanks to you for being a part of it as a witness. Blessings.